Chapter 3. If I didn't know you as well as I do, I'd never believe a story like this. He really fell on his head? Jessica doubled over with laughter. Eloise elbowed her best and only friend, Jessica Palmer, who sat in the yard with her. Honestly, Jess, it wasn't at all funny at the time. The sun couldn't have come up any sooner today. Eloise had been itching to share the story with Jessica. She'd brought Luke, her 18-month-old nephew, who went wherever she went. The three of them sat behind the boarding house where Jessica lived and worked with her mother. Jessica's father farmed a homestead they were still proving, up miles out of town. "And you were practically naked," Jessica said. "Oh, I'm so jealous. Why you get all the fun, I'll never know. What a time that would have been. Were you terribly frightened?" "I don't know." Eloise was not sure how she'd felt. "I was startled, of course, and I felt exposed in my underthings." She suppressed a giggle. "But Luke didn't pay any mind. He just went on splashing and kicking. But you know, when the man fell and lay there all stretched out with blood on his face, my mind didn't waver. I could have hightailed it in the other direction, but where? My clothes and everything were on his side of the river." Jessica, always the dreamer, fell back into the grass with her arms under her head. "Was he handsome? Rugged? Dangerous? I just told you he had blood all over his face." "Yes, but after that." Jessica propped herself up on one elbow. "So what'd you think of him?" Jessica loved to embellish a story. She was worse than the best fisherman. By this time, Luke had lost interest. He toddled off to the chicken house and was in the process of poking dandelions through the fence. Eloise watched him and smiled. "Luke loves chickens. Did I tell you he carried around a bit of clover all afternoon last week? Saving it to bring over. Such a funny boy. The chickens love him too. See how they're all lined up, waiting for what he might have for them? Tobias wanted me to keep chickens, but I didn't need anything else to take care of." Jessica poked a finger into Eloise's shoulder. "Elle, I know what you're doing." "Hmm?" Eloise knew her friend would try to pull every tiny detail of her. She had never been able to live up to Jessica's storytelling ideals. Sometimes it was more fun to let her work for it. "I'm dying over here," Jessica said. "Did he have warts or something? Was he old? Hairy? Were his teeth rotting out?" "You're disgusting," Eloise said. "He was normal, okay? He was young, well-built, dirty. He was very dirty. Looked like he was trying to grow a beard. And failing. The scruff on his face had days of growth, but patchy. She remembered when her brother Tobias had started growing a beard. He was so proud of the few hairs he'd sprouted, even when they didn't cover most of his cheeks. She eventually convinced him to keep it shaved for a few more years. "So he wasn't good-looking?" Eloise rolled her eyes heavenward. She was beginning to regret bringing it up. She knew what Jessica was hinting at, but it hurt more than she'd thought it would to play along. Pretending to be interested in other men held no delight for her. She tried to think of a topic to distract Jessica, but hiding something from her was like trying to hide fried bacon from a husband. Impossible. She was saved by Luke's dash toward the garden plot in search of more greens for the chickens. There was nothing planted yet except the sugar peas and radishes, but she wasn't taking chances with those. Despite the fun a toddler could have in freshly turned soil, it was not worth adding that mess to her workload for the day. Helen Palmer's voice rang across the yard. "Jessica Mary Palmer, I sent you out for eggs nigh 10 minutes ago. Are you laying 'em yourself? Morning, Eloise. Such a nice day to be out. It's going to be another warm one. Better soak it in while you can, but keep your shawl handy here." Helen stood at the back door with a wooden spoon in her hand. You must have crawled right under my nose. Come eat with us. We've got 3 new boarders this week who I simply must introduce you to." She scooped up Luke from the yard, and he squealed when she nuzzled his tummy. "Come on in," Helen said. "I've told them all about you, and they are such a nice bunch of boys." "Oh, Helen," Eloise said. "You didn't." "Baby, don't you owe Helen me. I've told them what I tell everybody. Why you wouldn't want lovely things said about you, I'll never know. I mentioned you would be stopping by this week, and look, I was right. So here we are." Helen raised her eyes at Jessica. "I'm still waiting on eggs." Eloise grimaced at Jessica, who mouthed a silent apology before she hurried off to the chicken house. "Helen," Eloise said, "I don't feel right eating so many meals here. You already work hard for your paying company. I can make my own food, honest." Helen squeezed Luke, and he snuggled against her. "Nonsense, baby, you're family. Besides, you eat half as much as Mr. Palmer, and he's only around a few Sundays a month." She planted a kiss on the toddler's cheek. "And I've seen the food you cook, if you want to call it that." "Helen." Helen ignored her retort. "I forget sometimes that you're not actually mine. Now get in here. I've got plenty of milk, and biscuits will be coming out any minute." Eloise sighed. She dreaded meeting another round of Helen's boys. Most were day laborers who didn't stick around for more than a season. They were hard-working, true. They were young and friendly, and they had dreams and plans. They also spent most of their money at the card tables, while a few would come to church and pray for their sins to be forgiven each Sunday. Regardless of their faults, she wasn't interested in any man, ever again. True love only came along once, and she'd found it. When Philip died, all her love went with him to the grave, and there it stayed, a constant tugging on her heart. Squaring her shoulders, she followed Helen to the house. "Helen, can I talk to you, please?" "Sure, baby." Helen sat on the steps and snuggled Luke until he squirmed away. "I've got 2 minutes left for those biscuits." Eloise leaned her shoulder against the wall. They watched Luke pick a blade of grass and bring it back to Helen's knee. "I would rather you didn't talk about me to any of your guests." "Why ever not? They're all nice boys." She held out her hand to accept more gifts of grass and a twig from Luke. "I know you don't mean any trouble, and that's why I haven't mentioned it before. But I just think—" Eloise held in a breath, trying to find just the right words to bring understanding without hurting Helen's feelings. "I would like to be the one to share my history. When I'm ready. It's hard to know how to act or behave, always wondering if they know or if they don't know or if it makes them uncomfortable. Honestly, it wasn't like he just died. One of these days I'd like to be known as Eloise again, and not Eloise the widow." Luke picked a handful of the grass he'd collected and shoved his whole fist into Helen's apron pocket. She reached her arm around Eloise and hugged her close, catching Luke between them. "If it means that much to you, I promise to never speak of you again. I can hold my tongue when I've a mind." Luke did not like being caught in the middle, and made his presence known with another squeal. The women laughed at him before Helen stood with him in her arms. "How about a second breakfast? I have just the thing for you." She easily maneuvered with Luke in her arms, swung open the door, and was inside before it slammed shut behind her. "Try to keep his hand out of the jelly jar this time," Eloise called to her. Standing and shaking off the bits of nature Luke had gathered, she walked to the middle of the yard. The sun bathed the grass with fresh hints of spring. A few dandelions were making an early show, and little curled ears of the violet leaves clustered in patches throughout the yard. With another sigh, she slumped to the ground and lay back in the grass to wait for Jessica. She didn't want to do anything. Breathe in, breathe out. She closed her eyes against the morning sun. A minute went by before it was blocked by a shadow. Jessica stood over her, egg basket in one arm and the other planted on her hip. Her face was stern and questioning. "Jess," Eloise said. "You look just like your mother when you do that." Eloise couldn't help but smile at the resemblance and waited for the advice she knew was coming. "Get up. There's no getting around it now. You just try to pull that boy away from her without a fight. I've never seen a kid eat so many biscuits." Jessica reached a hand to hoist Eloise off the ground. "Jess, you promise he didn't come in last night?" "Who? The normal-looking, well-built, dirty man who may or may not be rugged and dangerous?" Jessica winked and hooked arms with Eloise. "Nobody knew for 2 days, and Professor Oakfield has already left for the school, so you're safe. You know how he likes to go in early on Tuesdays. It's watering day or something or other. Have you seen his classroom? He's collected over 20 plants in there. He tends them all, and nary a student can touch 'em. Says he doesn't trust grimy fingers with them." Eloise steeled herself for another round of introductions to eligible young bachelors. She prepared to slap on a smile and say all the right things, but she didn't think she could do it today. Jessica turned and looked her over. She pulled a piece of grass from Eloise's hair. Unable to shove it aside any longer, it finally spilled out of Eloise's mouth. "Today is Philip's birthday." Jessica nodded. Jessica and Eloise were two opposite pieces of a puzzle that fit together. They were always what the other needed. Jessica knew how to rejoice with those who rejoiced, but she never shied away from mourning with those who mourned. "I know. He would have been 22. I know." Compassion filled her friend's face, and she pulled Eloise in for a hug. "I'm not going in today," Eloise said. "Tell Helen I'll swing by after the morning bell to fetch Luke. I'll be at the shop with Pa. I'm sure he won't mind the company today. Maybe he'll let me sweep out the place." "Okay, I'll tell her. I'm sure Mr. Davidson would love to see you today. Be good to yourself, hear me?" Eloise forced a smile and nodded. Brushing any extra grass from her skirts, she hopped off the steps and was around the corner and on to the Main Street boardwalk before the first tear fell.
Fresh hay, horse blanket, strong wooden walls. Zeke lay on his back, enjoying the quiet of the morning moments before the weight of responsibility sank in. He rarely had the luxury of rising when he pleased. Living with Paul and Beatrice Donnelly throughout his adolescent years had been a godsend, but he became one of 7 children on a farm, expected to pitch in with the rest of them. This meant rising with the dawn, even on the weekends. If Zeke didn't get up when he was supposed to, his adopted brother Mike, on more than one cold morning, yanked the blankets off him and threw them out the window. He lay still, staring at the rafters, at least until his stomach grumbled a reminder that he had entirely missed dinner last night. Time to get up. He stood and rolled his shoulders while he mentally ticked off his priorities for that day. Because he was impatient to venture out on his own, he had not saved anything to fund his trip. Therefore, at the forefront of the agenda was to find a job that paid in hard cash. First, he must eat food, bathe, eat more food, and find a respectable place to sleep. With an air of determination, he shook the kinks out, stretched his arms over his head, and caught a whiff of himself. A bath would need to be a priority. He finished dressing and smiled at the stall next to him, where Susie Girl was eyeing him. Running a hand through his hair, he gave it a thorough tousle and finger comb. "Morning, girl. Sleep well?" She snorted and moved closer to him. "Yeah? Good to hear. I hope you didn't make too big a mess in there. Yours truly is on duty, so take it easy, will you?" He braced himself with a hand on the stall to pull on his boot. She nuzzled his hand and nipped at his shirt cuff. "I like you too. Thanks for sticking around." Zeke crossed his arms and rested his elbows on the dividing wall. "You'll have to hang tight for a few days until I earn you a new shoe. And food." He ran a hand along the mare's jaw. The horse nickered and turned away. "Stinky?" Zeke asked. "Me? I knew I needed a shave, but I was under the impression that I smelled like a fresh summer rose." "Fine, I will. But you don't need to be rude about it." Making his way past the other stalls, Zeke poked his head into the front office, which doubled as a bedroom. The old man was not there. His bed was neatly made. Wondering what he should do, Zeke stared into the man's quarters. From behind, a voice made him jump. "You stink!" Zeke turned and almost put his foot in the path of tobacco juice heading his way. "I am aware, sir. Thank you for so kindly bringing it to my attention. Glad to see you this morning. So, hey, thanks for the bed last night. I was wondering if there was anything else I could do for you before I head into town. I was planning to walk around and see about a job. And food." The white mustache on the man's lip bobbed as if it were continuing the conversation on its own. "I reckon you ought to bring in fresh water for the stock, and when you're through you can wash yourself in the back room. Miss Helen don't take kindly to men of your type." Men of my type? He was a type now. Zeke grabbed the man's wrinkled hand and shook it gladly. "Yes, sir, I'll do that right away." Pumping and carrying the water was not difficult work. He finished it quickly and ran to the back room. He was really starting to feel the lack of food gnawing at his middle. Sure enough, waiting for him was a washtub and a bar of soap. The tub was empty, but he knew where to find the water. He filled the tub halfway and sucked in a breath to brave the chilly water. It just took a bit of getting used to. At least, that's what he tried to tell himself. Finding his razor, he did the best he could with his meager bathing arrangement. The harsh soap did a number on his skin, and he nicked himself a couple of times. A rustling noise in the corner brought his attention to a medium-sized black and white dog. It sniffed around his bags and his pile of discarded clothes. "Hey!" Zeke said. "Go on now." He whistled, but the dog looked at him unconcerned. Zeke shook a wet hand at him. "Hey, mutt, get lost. Those things aren't for you." The dog took one more sniff of his saddlebags, and before Zeke could do anything to stop him, he lifted his leg and relieved himself on Zeke's pile of clothes. "No!" Zeke yelled as he jumped out of the water. The damage was done. The mutt ran off in a hurry, having done his business. Zeke quickly sorted the pile through the straw and dirt stuck to his wet feet as he shuffled around. Luckily, his trousers were spared, with his vest on top of the pile getting the worst of it. He tossed it into the tub to soak while he finished dressing. Finding the cleanest of his 3 shirts, he dressed carefully. Making a good first impression would be important. He never knew who his next employer might be. Stumbling into town last night the way he did, it was just as well he'd never made it to a boarding house. If this Helen woman was as strict as Frank suggested, he should meet her on better terms. He wasn't the rugged cowboy type. He was simply tired and dirty and resembled more of a vagabond when he came off the trail. He was still easing into the rugged life of the trail, which is why he had made so many stops across the state. At this rate, it would take him a year to reach the ocean. He would make his way south this fall, if he was still traveling, in order to avoid a snow-covered winter. Rachel Donnelly, his adopted sister, had insisted he had too many holes in his plan. She just didn't understand spontaneity and the sense of adventure he felt. Zeke scrubbed and rinsed the vest and lay it over his pack to dry. Soon he left the livery with a bounce in his step and a smile on his face, having finished one thing on his to-do list. A gentle breeze brought attention to the damp brown hair that curled along the nape of his neck as it dried. He felt confident today was going to be a good day, despite the dog mishap. Avoid mangy dogs. His list kept growing. But first he would find a job and eat food. Real food, fresh food, warm food, from an oven. Stepping outside the livery, he looked across the street and scanned for shops that looked or smelled promising. He stood on the edge of the town square, 4 blocks of businesses and a church, surrounded a lawn with young trees being well tended. Some day this square would be completely shaded by the towering evergreens, oaks, and others that had been planted. The town was awake, and it was glorious to see. The large painted letters over the facade of each business were easy to read from where he stood. He scanned them for a diner. He saw Rose's Mercantile, Anderson's Bakery, Abigail's Dress Shop, and the sheriff's office. Looking the other way, he noticed the smithy down at the end of the block. Good, I'll go there first thing after breakfast. Quickly turning back to find food, he collided with another person.
"Oop!"
she said. He'd been so engrossed on his mission to find a place to eat that he hadn't seen or heard her coming. Her shoe was wedged between his boots, and her skirts caught around his legs. He grabbed her arms to keep her from falling as they stumbled a few awkward steps together before gaining their balance. Her wide-brimmed bonnet hid her face. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said. "I wasn't watching where I was going."
"Never mind. It's my fault. I was preoccupied myself."
She dusted her arms and straightened her skirts. Her voice was polite but distracted, as if crashing into him was a mere annoyance. It hadn't upset her, but she didn't look up, nor offer more. "You're not hurt, then?" he asked. "I hope I didn't crush your shoe." The brim of her bonnet did its job well. Each time he ducked to see her face, she turned her head.
"No, thank you. I'm fine."
With a nod of her covered head, she walked on. He placed his hands on his hips and watched her walk away. There was something about her that tickled him. She walked with a sense of urgency, as if she were trying to get away from something, or someone. On a whim, he looked behind him. No one was following her. Looking back at her, the blue skirts mesmerized him. Swish, swish, swish. Hints of her white petticoat showed from the hemline. His stomach interrupted. "Food, man!" But just before he turned to go, she stopped. He saw her face as she turned to look back at him. It was the woman from the creek. He didn't recognize her at first, with her hair pulled into a fashionable knot, and a bonnet primly tied under her chin. And she was fully dressed. Stockings, shoes, gloves, everything appropriately covered. A broad smile spread across his face, and he raised a hand to wave, but before he was given the chance, she turned and strode toward the smithy. "She doesn't recognize me." Was this good or bad? Definitely good, because now he had the chance to start over, yet also bad, because she'd already caught him ogling her. He had muddled not one, but two first impressions. Either way, it was time for food. Heading the other direction, he followed his nose to Anderson's bakery.